Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. To start off this Twitch recap portion, we were looking at contracts, seeing as how we could maybe make some money or something. When, well, eventually, after reviewing a whole lot of them, we found this get an uncrewed craft land on the Callisto contract, which is a contract we have failed before. Not for lack of trying, but because we just didn't quite do it on time. We still have this contract for an uncrewed Europa landing that we are in the middle of attempting, and the clock is definitely ticking on that thing. And after playing a little bit with the time scale at the bottom of Kerbal Alarm Clock, we decided that we are going to go ahead and accept yet another Land on Callisto contract. Now, we have a craft that's like halfway there, but that won't count because we have to launch a new vessel to do this. So we're going to go ahead and accept the contract and its very generous bonus of a couple of $1 million before we start moving on to our next phase of testing. And this, I give you the DN-6 Delta. This is a 3 SRB version. We also have a single SRB version, which it's like it uses 2 SRBs, one on each side, instead of 2 3-packs for a total of 6. Other than that, it is the exact same DN-6 launch vehicle, but the Delta is the new upper stage, which is a little more pancakey, a little wider, gives us a better base to work with for deploying wider payloads, such as our Aero shells for our Mars surface base as part of Project M97, and a little more stability in that regard. The HG3A has been replaced with an HG3B, but that gives us a little more runtime on the transfer stage, but really that's just to compensate for the extra dry mass of the wider tanks and the fairing, which is also why we needed some SRBs to help get this thing off the ground. The DN-6 is not known for its peppy liftoffs, so we've added either the 2-pack or the 6-pack of Space Shuttle SRBs to help really get things underway, and it does give us about a 1.2 liftoff TWR. This is our very first testing sim with this new lift vehicle, and we just wanted to make sure that all the separations go cleanly, since the SRBs will be deploying top and bottom instead of the strap-on boosters, which will pop off side to side and therefore have a much lesser chance of impacting anything on their way out the door. But the SRBs burning quite well and giving us a very decent TWR off the pad, which means we can better utilize some of our long runtime out of those 6 RS-25s for the core stage. Hopefully we won't have to tail stand nearly as hard as we try to fight this thing into an orbit, which is one of the things about the DN-6 that always kind of bugged me, was that we could get very heavy things into orbit. But it always kind of felt like not by much. Our liftoff TWR was terrible, and we'd always have at least 500 meters per second left in the core stage at main engine cutoff because we had achieved our orbital event, meaning that this thing has the capacity to lift a lot more tonnage than what we've currently got it rated for, except that it wouldn't even be able to get off the pad, and our gravity losses due to low TWR would be absolutely abhorrent. And other than expanding the boosters and adding maybe a 5th RD-172 engine to help this thing along, maybe we can save cost and save, I don't know, development time. We don't have tooling to worry about, so that's not really a thing, but it would just seem that the cheaper route would be just go the traditional Kerbal way and add more boosters. So the SRBs deployed, they're cleaning away, no problems there, and we're still just tail standing it a little bit until I realize what's going on, and then a very drastic nose down so that we can aim just a bit down horizon before we let our apogee get too wildly out of control as we kind of lead into that 4 TWR, and that was our first real problem. Fairing deploy lacks the ejection power to get the hell out of our way, although ideally we would not be separating those fairings until after booster set, when our TWR drops to a 1.12 in this case. So there's a chance that they would have gotten out of the way had we been accelerating a little slower, but it's an eventuality I'd like to avoid because, as you can see, it took out some of our aerocell sections. 2 of the lost sections did contain fuel for the main engine at the bottom of the Aero shell, but I think the total loss of fuel there, this would not have scrubbed the mission. And considering how strapped for cash we are and are going to be, it's likely that we would have just pushed this one all the way to Mars anyway, just scratching it up as unexpected mass savings in transit, and just kind of hoping that the Aero shell survived its orbital insertion and then its descent and landing. But it seems to be that the cure for the wiggles that we are having on this booster is to just fly from the probe core attached to the core stage. We did enable auto struts on the top of the Aero shell and remove the probe core from the top of the Aero shell and relocated it to the bottom of the Aero shell. And I did do some testing just to make sure that wasn't going to screw up our having avionics at any point, and it is not. So thankfully, that took care of some of it, but there is still some persistent wiggle with the top of that Aero shell just kind of bouncing around and throwing off our nav ball readings. So I think the SOP for these launches is just going to be control from the core. And then when you stage it off, which we are surely going to do here very shortly, you can just switch vessels. Yeah, see, now we're part of the core stage, and now we are part of the Delta upper stage, which, like I said before, is just a wider, flatter variant of the B upper stage. The solar panels have been corrected, and the HG3 engine has been upgraded. Everything else here appears to be looking pretty normal. We'll get 4.3 kilometers per second for our transfer out of this stage to Mars, which is well within threshold. So we're going to jump back to the launch pad and now run yet another simulation on the twin or single SRB variant of the DN-6 Delta. I don't yet have a separate designation for this launch vehicle versus the 6 SRB version of the exact same thing, but other than having only 2 strap-on solid rocket motors, everything else is the exact same, and I do think I adjusted the ejection power on this one, but I did forget to switch control to the core stage Saturn avionics computer. So you can see this this bob and wiggle. It looks really bad if you pay attention to the rocket on the screen, but if you just pay attention to the nav ball, we're actually not getting any of that wiggle translating through there. It does just kind of make the bounce back on control input a little weird. Like it, I don't know, it tends to bounce back a little harder, but based on these test flights, I don't think it's anything that I actually need to be worried about. We did not have much issue getting this vehicle up off the pad and following a solid trajectory to orbit. Just waiting on flame out of those SRBs, or at least for their thrust to start really dropping, and then we'll just go ahead and stage them away. They're gonna spit the last pitiful remnants of their fuel out on the way down. If we were using stage recovery, we would absolutely put parachutes on them and get them back and reuse them every single time, but unfortunately I don't, so we won't be, and things will be expensive. But yeah, that is a very good demonstration of the wiggles that I was talking about before, but again, I think we can manage this, and I think we can go ahead and get these missions off the ground once we get them built. And the good news is, with the contractual advance from our Land on the Callisto contract, we can afford to put everything we need into production. That's the M97 base module core, 2 supply rovers, the lab rover, and a replacement basket for our descent stage, which Lazy Me has still not picked an official name for yet, but we have some pretty good suggestions in the comments of that video. And well, fairings up, everything went well, and then Yes, just booster set. It's... Oh, KSP, no. No! KSP had crashed again. I think that was the second time during the live stream that was a thing. KSP was definitely not happy with me. So, we're going to start getting our Callisto mission put together, and this was something I did not remember was a thing. It's a DN-6 variant with RS-68s as the main engine. It's probably a bad idea. I guess it flew. I don't remember, but this is the core part of the spacecraft that we were going to be spending a lot of time with and paying the most attention to. Namely, since we're only required to radio in a telemetry report from the surface, we're going to go ahead and strip off the rest of the scientific equipment and try to save as much mass as we can. We're also going to upgrade all of these thruster ports to level 7s, up from their existing level 5s, I believe. And yeah, so we're sitting right at about 2.4 kilometers per second, which should be more than enough, I'm hoping, for a descent and landing onto Callisto. And if we play our cards absolutely correctly, the lander itself will be using its fuel only for that purpose. And so fingers crossed that we don't land in a new and unique biome, and I feel really stupid now for tearing all of the scientific equipment off. Now, this capture and transfer stage that we have is great, but the lessons learned from operating under a limited timeline, I think we are going to kind of abandon the method of using a lot of gravity assists in order to save Delta V. Now, we'll still be using some gravity assists to save Delta V, but because we have an enhanced lift capacity to orbit now, I think that we are going to try for something a little bit more direct, probably. Anyway, we removed all of the single pack thrusters and went with just a straight pair of quads that will actually save us just a little bit of mass, and will actually make our translations a little bit more efficient, because we only have 4 thrusters firing instead of, like, I don't know, 4, 8, 12, something like that. So for any translational adjustment, we should be at least 1/3 better than we were. So unfortunately, pushing this thing out to the Delta V I would like to see has pushed it beyond our tonnage requirements. We'll slap a different controller core on there, even though it doesn't shut down, which means we should also include more RTGs. Never a problem, we have unlimited plutonium. But I thought we might need something with a little more oomph. 3 AJ-10s just don't really seem like they're gonna work for us. So we're going to put on the experimental lander engine that has been experimental for like 20 years now, but with the same size core stage and just a reassignment of the tanks, we go from 5 point something kilometers, 6.7 kilometers per second of Delta V, which should be hopefully well more than enough for us to get the job done. We'll need that Delta V for capturing into Jupiter orbit, and then, of course, fine-tuning, and then a large burn capture into orbit of Callisto before we proceed with our landing. So the only other issue here is that our Delta upper stage is only going to give us about 4.4 kilometers per second of Delta V, which is not enough to put us on course for Jupiter. We probably need another 2 kilometers per second or so. It's a good thing that the experimental lander engine is pump fed and therefore does not need a pressurized tank, so we can switch this one over to a balloon tank and see our Delta V skyrocket on that stage to about 8.8 kilometers per second, which means I no longer really care if we have enough Delta V in the Delta upper stage to get us to Jupiter, because we've got like an extra 2 kilometers per second we can really put to good use there. The downside of this, of course, is that we do need some high pressurized tanks for the RCS thrusters to work at all. So we'll include some golden foily balls down there at the bottom, rescale the tank, and our final numbers, we're looking at about 8.8 8 kilometers per second on the capture stage, and we're up to 5.5 kilometers per second on our delta upper stage, which we know for certain we can put into an orbit without any real problem whatsoever. So we just need to reassign fuel to all of the core stage fuel tanks, because for some reason when you save them as a sub-assembly they don't come fueled. And a last check of our Delta V actually looks pretty good as far as the core stage being able to put a unlit Delta upper stage into low Earth orbit, getting it ready for its transfer. And at a price tag so far of only about 287,000 Kerbucks, this is actually one of the cheaper DN-6 launches we've ever done. We're usually looking at a price tag at least 100 grand more, but all of that is in the complexity and the science equipment on the payload. So we're going to go ahead and get this one in the build queue. We're also going to get every single launch that we need for our next phase of Mars launches in the build queue, so that at least that part won't be stressing me out anymore. And we'll move out of the Twitch recap territory into some stuff I was able to record on my own, and there'll be more of this in a following episode, hopefully in a day or two. But we were pretty much on top of a Venus window, and unfortunately the only thing that we really had time to get together to go to Venus was something that we already had built, and just rolling it out to the pad put us a day or two behind said window. But this is another Lima resupply pod bound for Venus and our crew at Ostrich Station in Venus orbit. This is to replace the one that spontaneously burned up and exploded on its Aero capture maneuver at Venus, so that our crew there can have enough kerosene and liquid oxygen to push their spacecraft home when the time comes around. I think we're about a year and some coin away from that Venus crew being able to disembark and return to Earth, which will also complete us the crewed Venus flyby contract and get us a whole bunch of money, we hope anyway, and fund our endeavors long into the future, so long as we don't fail that Europa landing contract. That one might be the stick in our craw, but I have a plan. If you go bankrupt, they can take your money, but they can't take your rockets. So if you keep an expansive stable of rockets just sitting around, whenever you come across financial hardships, you can just sell back some of those rockets and have enough money to keep operating. So boosters are down and away, fairing SEP without problem. We're going to get our comms queued up, we're going to get our radiators turned on eventually, and continue our way on up to a low Earth orbit as we ride just on this core stage, which has the roll wiggles. I don't know why. I mean, SAS does this. Mech Jeb is just far worse. So we just, I don't know, we deal with what we can. Trying to launch into a lunar inclination should give us a 3 and some coin meter per second transfer. I think 3 point something. We'll see it here in just a little bit. So we've got that coming up for us. It actually is a relatively cheap Venus window, but the transfer angle doesn't really agree with us getting things to Ostrich Station. Our angle of approach is comically bad, and will require quite a lot of plane change adjustment to get anything in plane with the station itself. So we're really going to try extra hard for a highly eccentric orbit after capture, so that that plane change maneuver can be done really cheaply. And then, of course, the subsequent aero braking passes to bring the resupply pod down and eventually into an orbit that we can use to intercept Ostrich Station and do rendezvous and docking. So Mech Jeb has been kind enough to plot the node for us. 3.87 kilometers per second of Delta V needed to make this transfer. We'll lean into it by firing up all of our RCS thrusters and then see another good light on that HG3A on our B upper stage. And then a very long burn to get us ejected and on course. So I hope at least we can enjoy the view, because I completely ran out of things to talk about. No, but much to my surprise, the crew on Ostrich Station has chewed through like 90% of the science that they had there to research. And well, I spent some time out there while radioing in some of their sciencey reporty bits because we needed the money. I think they've actually covered every biome that they're going to be able to cover. At least I've not been greeted with one where we were seeing any significant returns from any of their scientific equipment, or any returns at all. And I do believe that everything that they need to research is already in the lab, meaning they've probably got less than a year's worth of work to do before they have exhausted all of their sciencey bit things, at least for the time being. So I've decided to make the, I don't know, I guess the secondary objective of this spacecraft, this resupply pod, is to get some telemetry analyses run while doing the Aero capture maneuver, because then we can get in high atmo stuff to research. And I mean, it'd be even better if it covered 2 biomes while doing so, although I'm not going to put my money on it. But realistically, that's not going to keep them, I don't know, occupied or with stuff to do for very much longer. And so, well, that's a thing. So it may look like our the lifetime of our Ostrich Station might be a one and done once the current crew rotates out. At this particular juncture, I have no plans on sending another crew back, at least until we can devise some other way of giving them something to do. 90% of the reason they're there is because we can fulfill a contract with it. The other 10% was because of the enormous science yields gained from having an orbital research station on site. And well, without either of those, we don't really have much of a reason to send a crew back, because it's very, very, very unlikely that anything that we can do science with on the surface would have any chance at all of getting that back to the orbital lab for further study. Though it would be a really neat goal to do a sample return from Venus. I just don't know if we have that capacity currently. So with about 200 meters per second left to go on this bird, we'll roll the throttle back and then just about halfway back up again, so that we can try to dial this in best we can. And of course, nothing comes to fruition. So we will just plot ourselves another node as we are getting closer to our escape, and just tug at this randomly until we can turn our encounter into an actual encounter, and then spin the nav ball around as we try very desperately to dial this in and get a number on that ascending or descending node. That's what I'm looking for. That is not just absolutely ridiculous, but it looks like no matter what we do, we're going to come in across one pole or the other. So that's a thing. And we've got about 200 meters per second left in our main engine. We're going to use the vast majority of that to finish out this burn. So I guess my dreams of being able to propulsively assist this aero capture are quickly falling out of the window, although I think we will keep the B upper stage attached, really if only because it's got really nice big solar panels on it, and we can keep everything powered up that way. So by firing this node a little early, we weren't able to get a extremely good capture angle, but it is, well, it's something. At least there's that. So we'll set ourselves a node for our SOI change so that we can hopefully correct this closer on the way in. But that's going to do it for this episode, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it. And I will see all of you in the next one. Until then, see you later.